Mister, will you watch a cartoon with me?
Han Min-jae didn't even look up from his laptop when the tiny hand tugged gently at the sleeve of his white shirt. Financial reports covered one screen. Architectural blueprints filled another. His phone rested on speaker as senior executives waited for his decision from the company headquarters downtown. "Chairman Han," one voice said through the phone, "the investors need your approval within the next 5 minutes." Before he could answer, a soft little voice interrupted the silence. "Mr. Will you watch a cartoon with me?" His fingers froze above the keyboard. The room became so quiet that the rain tapping against the tall glass windows sounded deafening. Standing beside his desk was a little black girl no older than 3. She clutched a faded gray elephant in one hand and a small tablet in the other. Her wide brown eyes looked at him with complete sincerity, as though asking one of the richest men in South Korea to watch cartoons was the most ordinary thing in the world. From the hallway came hurried footsteps. "Zuri!" A woman rushed into the office, her face pale with panic. She immediately bowed so deeply, her forehead almost touched the polished wooden floor. "I'm so sorry, sir. I only looked away for a second. Please forgive her." The voices on the speakerphone continued. "Chairman Han? Sir? Are you still there?" Min-jae stared at the little girl for several long seconds. Then, without saying a word, he pressed a button. "I'll call back later." He ended the meeting. His employees on the other end sat in stunned silence as the line went dead. The billionaire slowly closed his laptop, looked at the child, and asked quietly, "What cartoon?" Zuri's face lit up brighter than the morning sun. Before you hear why that simple question changed a lonely billionaire forever, take a moment to like this story, subscribe if you enjoy emotional dramas, and tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest moments become the biggest turning points. Long before anyone called him Korea's youngest billionaire, Han Min-jae had learned that success attracted admiration while trust invited betrayal. At 30 years old, he owned one of the country's largest real estate companies, designing luxury towers that reshaped the skyline of Seoul. Business magazines praised his discipline. Television hosts called him a genius. Investors competed for his attention. None of them knew what happened after the cameras disappeared. His fiancée had sold private details about his life to reporters after their engagement ended. The mentor who had taught him everything about business secretly stole a multi-billion-dollar overseas project and claimed it as his own. A trusted executive had accepted bribes from competitors for years before disappearing with confidential company information. Every betrayal left another scar. Eventually, Min-jae stopped believing that people stayed because they cared. They stayed because they wanted something. His mansion reflected the man he had become. It was breathtakingly beautiful. 4 stories of glass, stone, and steel overlooking the Han River. Everything had its place. Everything remained spotless. Everything remained silent. Employees spoke only when necessary. No music played through the halls. No family photographs decorated the walls. The house looked perfect. It never felt alive. Across Seoul, Ama Okafor folded a neatly pressed maid's uniform while trying not to panic. At 33, she had spent 6 years in South Korea after leaving Lagos in search of better opportunities. She had mastered Korean, earned an excellent reputation through an international housekeeping agency, and finally received the assignment every domestic worker hoped for, working for Han Min-jae. The salary would allow her to rent a better apartment, save money for her daughter's education, and finally stop worrying about every bill that arrived. Then, at 6 that morning, everything fell apart. Her babysitter called crying, "My husband has collapsed. They're taking him to the hospital. I can't watch Zuri today." Amma closed her eyes. Every relative she knew lived thousands of miles away. Every friend she trusted was already working. If she missed her first day, the agency could replace her immediately. She looked toward the bedroom. 3-year-old Zuri sat cross-legged on the floor watching her favorite cartoon while hugging her little stuffed elephant. The cheerful music filled their tiny apartment. When the episode ended, Zuri looked up and smiled. "Are we going to your new job, Mommy?" Amma knelt in front of her. "You have to come with me today." "Okay, but you have to be very quiet." "I'll be quieter than a butterfly." Amma laughed despite the knot in her stomach. "I know you will." When they arrived at the mansion, the size of the building seemed to swallow them whole. The agency supervisor met them at the entrance. Her smile disappeared the moment she noticed Zuri. "What is this?" "My babysitter had an emergency. You know children aren't allowed inside clients' homes." "I know. You should have called. I couldn't lose this job." The supervisor sighed heavily. "If Mr. Han complains even once, your assignment ends today." Amma nodded. "I understand." The supervisor reluctantly allowed them inside. She found a quiet corner near the family sitting room and spread a small blanket on the floor. "There," Amma whispered. "You can draw and watch one cartoon while Mommy works." "I won't make trouble." "I know." For the next several hours, Amma worked tirelessly. She dusted bookshelves taller than most apartments, polished marble staircases until they reflected the ceiling, arranged fresh flowers exactly as instructed. Every few minutes, she quietly checked on Zuri. The little girl never wandered. She colored pictures, watched cartoons through headphones, and smiled at everyone who walked past. Most employees smiled back. Only one person hadn't seen her yet: Han Minjai. Late that morning, he stepped out of his private office to make coffee. As he passed the sitting room, Zuri looked up from her cartoon. She waved enthusiastically. "Hello, mister." He paused. Nobody greeted him that casually. Not executives, not employees, certainly not strangers. For a moment, he simply looked at the child. Then, almost without thinking, he gave the smallest wave back. Zuri beamed as if she had just won the greatest prize in the world. Neither of them realized it. But that tiny exchange was the first crack in the walls Han Minjai had spent years building around his heart. Zuri celebrated that tiny wave as though she had made a brand new friend. She hugged her little elephant and whispered, "See? He's nice." Amma smiled while folding freshly ironed towels, but she wasn't convinced. "Mr. Han is kind enough to let us stay. Don't bother him, sweetheart. He's very busy." "I won't." "You promise?" "I promise." For the rest of the afternoon, Zuri kept her word. She remained in her corner, coloring pictures of smiling suns, bluebirds, and little houses, while her cartoon played softly through her headphones. Every so often, she glanced toward Minjai's office, wondering if he was still working. Inside that office, work never stopped. Emails poured onto 3 computer monitors. Contracts waited for signatures. Architects called with urgent questions. His finance director phoned twice in less than an hour. Normally, Minjay could work through any distraction. Today, however, something unexpected kept stealing his attention. Laughter. Small, genuine laughter drifting faintly from the sitting room. He found himself pausing between emails, listening without realizing it. When he finally noticed what he was doing, he frowned. "What are you doing?" he muttered to himself. He closed the office door. Yet somehow the silence felt heavier than before. The next morning, Amma arrived with Zuri again. "I found another babysitter," she explained to the supervisor, "but she can't start until next week." The supervisor nodded reluctantly. "As long as Mr. Han doesn't object." To Amma's surprise, he never did. Days became a quiet routine. Every morning, Zuri unpacked 3 things: her elephant, her crayons, her tablet. Every afternoon, she watched the same cartoon while Amma worked through the enormous mansion. The little girl never complained, never demanded attention, never touched anything she wasn't supposed to. She simply filled the quiet house with little bursts of laughter. One afternoon, Minjay passed by as she was singing along with the cartoon's opening song. She immediately smiled. "Hello again, mister." This time, he didn't just wave. "Good afternoon." Her eyes widened. "You remembered me." He almost smiled. "Yes, my name is Zuri. I'm Minjai." She tilted her head. "I know." He raised an eyebrow. "My mommy says thank you to you every day." Before he could answer, Amma hurried over. "Zuri, don't interrupt Mr. Han." "It's all right," Minjay replied quietly. He looked at the little girl. "Do you always watch the same cartoon?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It's my favorite." "You don't get bored?" "No." "Why?" "Because happy things don't stop being happy." The answer caught him completely off guard. He stood there for another second before quietly returning to his office. For the rest of the day, those 6 words refused to leave his mind. Happy things don't stop being happy. That evening, he found himself remembering something he hadn't thought about in years. A tiny apartment, rain against old windows, his mother placing 2 bowls of instant noodles on a tiny table, a cartoon playing on a secondhand television, her laughter, his own laughter. He blinked. The memory disappeared. He immediately buried himself in work again. The following week brought unexpected visitors. Several senior executives came to the mansion to discuss an international construction project. Amma worked carefully around them, making coffee and serving refreshments while Zuri remained quietly in the family lounge. The new babysitter quit last minute, but everything seemed under control until the Wi-Fi disconnected. Zuri frowned at her tablet. No internet. She pressed a few buttons. Nothing happened. Trying to help herself, she wandered into the sitting room where a massive television covered an entire wall. She remembered seeing one of the staff use the remote. Maybe cartoons work there. She pressed one button. The television came alive. The cheerful cartoon theme echoed through the open living area. Because Min-jae's office door stood open, the music drifted directly inside. One executive looked toward the hallway and chuckled. I didn't realize Chairman Han ran a daycare. Another laughed louder. Maybe the next board meeting should include cartoons. Amma rushed in immediately, her face drained of color. Zuri! The little girl jumped. I'm sorry, Mommy. Amma grabbed the remote. I'm terribly sorry, everyone. She turned toward Min-jae. I'm so sorry, sir. This won't happen again. The room waited. One executive shook his head. Agency workers should follow basic rules. Another added, this is exactly why personal feelings shouldn't interfere with professionalism. Amma lowered her head. I understand. Before anyone could continue, Min-jae calmly stood. He walked into the living room. Every eye followed him. He looked at the frozen image of colorful cartoon animals on the giant television. Then he looked back at his executives. You've all spent the last hour discussing how to build better communities. Nobody answered. He continued quietly. And yet, he glanced toward Zuri. A child laughing bothers you. Silence. The executive, who had mocked the situation, forced a smile. We were only joking. Were you? Nobody spoke. Min-jae picked up the remote. Instead of switching the television off, he lowered the volume, then handed the remote back to Zuri. You can finish your episode. The little girl smiled shyly. Thank you. Amma stared in disbelief. So long as she keeps the volume low, Min-jae added, I don't see a problem. The executives exchanged awkward glances. The meeting ended minutes later. After they left, Amma approached him. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. They could have complained. They already complain about everything else. For the first time, Amma heard something unexpected. A joke, very small, very dry, but unmistakably a joke. She smiled. So they do. As she walked away, Min-jae noticed something unusual. Smiling hadn't felt forced. In fact, it had felt surprisingly natural. That night, after everyone had gone home, the mansion became silent once more. He poured himself a cup of coffee and walked past the family lounge. On the small table lay a drawing. It showed 3 smiling stick figures. One had curly hair, one wore an apron. The tallest wore a black suit. Above them floated a bright yellow sun. At the bottom, written in uneven crayon letters, were the words, Cartoons are better with friends. Min-jae stared at the picture longer than he intended. He should have walked away. Instead, he carefully folded the drawing and slipped it into his briefcase. The next morning began like every other. Emails, conference calls, deadlines. Yet there was one difference. Han Min-jae glanced at the folded crayon drawing inside his briefcase before opening his laptop. He had no logical explanation for why he had brought it into his office, but he couldn't bring himself to leave it behind. Outside, rain drummed softly against the glass walls of the mansion. Amma finished arranging fresh flowers while Zuri sat in her usual corner, humming along with her favorite cartoon. A few minutes later, Min-jae stepped out of his office to refill his coffee. Zuri looked up. Mister, he smiled faintly. Good morning. She studied his face for a moment. You look tired. Amma immediately apologized. Zuri. It's all right, Min-jae said. She's right. He hadn't slept much. Another overseas negotiation had kept him awake until dawn. As he carried his coffee back toward his office, Zuri called after him. When you're done working, he stopped. Will you watch a cartoon with me? He looked at the laptop waiting on his desk, then at the little girl. I'll try. For the first time in years, someone had given him something to look forward to, besides another successful deal. Hours passed. His finance director called twice. Architects requested urgent approvals. Investors want revisions before the market opened overseas. Still, every so often he glanced at the clock. At exactly 4 o'clock, he closed the final document. His assistant called. Chairman Han, the Singapore investors are ready. They can wait 30 minutes. There was silence. Sir? I said they'll wait. He ended the call. Then he walked into the family lounge. Zuri's eyes grew wide. You came! I said I'd try. She patted the sofa beside her. You sit here. He sat. She pressed play. Bright colors filled the screen. Funny animals chased each other through a forest, while cheerful music echoed around the room. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then, Zuri burst into laughter. Real, unstoppable laughter. Without thinking, Minjai laughed too. The sound startled even him. Amma looked up from polishing a nearby cabinet. She had never heard him laugh before, not once. He laughed again, then suddenly, he stopped. His eyes filled with tears. The cartoon hadn't made him cry. The memory had. He was 7 years old again, squeezed beside his mother in their tiny apartment. They had almost no money. Rain leaked through the old window. Dinner was nothing more than instant noodles. Yet every Sunday morning they watched cartoons together. His mother always laughed before the funny parts. So I don't miss them, she used to say. When she passed away months later, he never watched another cartoon, not once, until today. A tear rolled down his cheek. Amma quietly reached for a tissue. I'm sorry, he whispered. You don't have to apologize, she answered gently. I thought I'd forgotten her voice. But you didn't. No. You remembered because something good reminded you. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Zuri slipped her tiny hand into his. See? He looked down. Happy things don't stop being happy. He smiled through his tears. No, they don't. From that day forward, cartoon time became part of the mansion's routine. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, no matter how busy he was, Minjay spent 30 minutes watching cartoons with Zuri. The staff noticed first, then the company. His temper became calmer. He asked employees about their families. He stopped sending emails after midnight. He even began eating lunch instead of skipping meals. People whispered that their chairman seemed different. They were right. He wasn't becoming weaker. He was becoming whole. One evening, while they shared tea after Zuri had fallen asleep on the sofa, Amma finally spoke about the past she rarely mentioned. I stayed in my marriage much longer than I should have. Minjai listened quietly. I kept telling myself children need both parents. She looked toward her sleeping daughter. Then one day I realized, children don't just watch what we say. They watch how we live. So I left. Were you afraid? Terrified. Any regrets? Only that I didn't leave sooner. He nodded slowly. I built walls because I thought they protected me. And did they? They protected me from pain. She smiled sadly. And also from joy. Those words stayed with him. Months passed. Then another opportunity arrived. Amma received an offer to manage a luxury hotel in Toronto. The salary was more than double what she earned. Housing, benefits. A future she had never imagined. Accepting meant leaving Korea. When she told Minjai, he remained silent for several moments. It's an incredible opportunity, he finally said. It is. You should take it. She searched his face. I was hoping you'd say that. On their final morning, Zuri ran into the mansion carrying her elephant. Mister, he knelt, I have something to show you. He led them to a large room on the first floor. The doors open. Amma gasped. Bookshelves lined one wall. Art supplies covered another. Soft rugs, tiny tables, painting easels, shelves filled with children's books. A large television waited in one corner. What is this? Amma whispered. A children's room. For Zuri. For every employee's child. Above the doorway hung a wooden sign. Joy lives here. Zuri wrapped her little arms around his neck. Thank you. Then she whispered, don't forget cartoon time. I won't. After they left for Canada, the mansion felt quieter, but it never felt empty again. Every Saturday, employees brought their children, the halls filled with laughter. The children's room became the happiest place in the house. Sometimes Minjai joined them. Sometimes he simply listened from the hallway. Either way, he smiled. One rainy afternoon, months later, he entered the children's room alone. The television automatically resumed the last cartoon Zuri had watched. He sat down, not because he was lonely, but because now the memories no longer hurt. They healed. He laughed at the same jokes, just as Zuri always had. Because happy things really didn't stop being happy. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and tell us in the comments about a small act of kindness that changed your life. Stories like these remind us that love is often found in the simplest moments. Han Minjai had spent years believing wealth, power, and success could protect him from heartbreak. A 3-year-old child proved him wrong. She never offered business advice. She never solved his problems. She simply asked one honest question: "Will you watch a cartoon with me?" Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with applause, miracles, or grand speeches. Sometimes it arrives holding a stuffed elephant, carrying a tablet, and asking for 30 minutes of your time. And sometimes, those 30 minutes can change a life forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who needs a reminder that the greatest gifts in life can never be bought. They can only be shared.